Are you sure?
Here's the 30-second lesson on what legends know. Never ask a bride why she's getting married. Don't wear a skirt on a windy day. Deodorant is not a shower. Don't sniff chili flakes. And don't forget, saving is not investing. Legends don't just save, they invest in mutual funds. Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
With so much happening in our parliament, in our politics, how come I'm talking about Canadian politics instead? There is a few reasons. The first reason is that while there is a lot of noise coming out of our parliament, there isn't that much clutter, for the simple reason that any side that's talking there is presenting its well-known, established point of view. And these are well-known arguments, so there is no real clutter. There is a lot of noise, but it is not the function of cut the clutter to deal with noise of that kind. That is for the Speaker of the House to deal with. Second, a lot of the analysis and a lot of the understanding of what's happening in Parliament, you are seeing, reading, watching, hearing from my colleagues. Really formidable political team led by DK Singh. In fact, as I speak with you, DK Singh has already recorded an episode of Instant Analysis on why the BJP seems to be so off balance over the Ambedkar issue. Amit Shah held a press conference today. So he's talking about that. So you can get a lot of that there. And the third thing is that today we live in a globalized world. India is a country which has stakes everywhere. India has big stakes in what's happening in Canadian politics right now. Canada, in fact, is accusing us. This Canadian administration, Trudeau administration, has been accusing India quite frontally and quite prominently, not just of getting involved in quote-unquote assassinations and other crimes. That is besides the point, but also in overseas foreign interference in Canadian politics. The fact is that India has a big stake in Canadian politics. The fact also is that if Justin Trudeau stood for an election in India, I don't think he would win even an election in a university in India. He must be among the most unpopular politicians in India, except maybe if he goes to some parts of our Punjab instead. He might discover, however, there that on those all the immigration shops in our Punjab, in many of those hoardings, Canada is spelled not with a C but a K. Jana kithe hai? Canada, right? Like that. What's happening in Canada is it looks like bottom has fallen off Trudeau's government. Trudeau is now the longest serving leader in the G7 group. All the others have changed. He is now the longest serving. He is hoping to get his fourth consecutive term. His election is due in next October. However, he does not have a majority. He's been kept in power by an outside party. An outside party very much like the left was with the UPA in the first term of UPA. So the left did not participate in the government, but at the same time, it supported the government from outside. So just like that, there is the party called NDP, New Democratic Party, headed by Jagmeet Singh, a man of Indian origin, a Sikh of Indian origin, a very impressive guy, good speaker, quite a hard socialist and populist. He's got 25 seats. It's very much like the left UPA situation. Now, Canadian House of Commons has a strength of 338. So halfway mark is 170. 169 the halfway mark, majority 170. Liberal Party, which is Trudeau's party, has 153. So they are short of 17 seats, whereas NDP has 25. So 153 plus 25 becomes 178. That is how Trudeau is kept in power. If there is a vote of confidence, he will be defeated if NDP decides not to vote in his favor. Now, this is a strange situation where NDP will not participate in the government, at the same time will not let the government fall. Now, there is a theory about that, and it's an interesting story. I will come to that, and that will also answer the question as to why many of Jagmeet Singh's critics and Trudeau's critics are calling Jagmeet Singh Pension Singh. I will come to that. However, first look at what has happened in Canadian politics over the last couple of weeks, which sparks this episode of Cut the Clutter. Now, first of all, the most important thing, the Finance Minister of Canada. Canada has a tradition of presenting economic updates. Periodically, economic updates are presented to people of Canada and to the world in general. This is after all a G7 economy, an OECD country, a very rich country with a $56,000 per capita income. So it's in the same category. In fact, it's richer than most European countries. Very rich country. Not as rich as America, but very rich country. Just on the day that the finance minister had to present the fall economic update, finance minister was Chrystia Freeland. She was finance minister, also deputy prime minister. Just on the day that she had to present this fall economic update, she resigned. She not only resigned, but she wrote a scathing letter of resignation to her Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, and she released this letter to public. Now, some of the stuff she says in this letter is quite damning, coming from the Deputy Prime Minister to the Prime Minister. She says, first of all, that we should seek an honest and viable path. In detail, I am sharing the link of the entire letter with you. You will also see the letter on your screen. She's basically suggesting that what Trudeau is doing mainly amounts to indulging in cheap gimmicks. And she says that we need an honest and viable path instead of costly economic gimmicks. These are exact quotes from her letter. Now, this is also triggered by Donald Trump's threat of imposing a 25% tariff on any imports from Canada and from Mexico as well, unless these two countries, these two North American neighbors of America, in fact, has only two neighbors with which it shares a border. To the north, Canada, to the south, Mexico, the land border. So Trump has said that unless the two of you, that is Mexico and Canada, take strong enough action or convincing action against fentanyl smuggling to America. Fentanyl is an opioid which is killing a lot of Americans. It's a big addiction in America and a big national problem. And illegal immigration, which is also one big national challenge in America, but also was a big campaign promise for Donald Trump. Unless you do this, I'm going to impose 25% tariffs on any imports from you. For Canada, that will be crippling because 75% of all of Canada's exports to any country are to their southern neighbor, that is America. That could cripple Canada's economy. That's the reason Justin Trudeau had just the other day, just a couple of weeks back, gone to Mar-a-Lago to spend an evening with Donald Trump, maybe to try and get a peace deal or a tariff deal, whatever you might call it, beforehand. That, however, did not seem to have ended very convincingly because there were rude things said by Trump after that, which I will tell you about as we go along. It was with reference to that Chrystia Freeland wrote in her letter, and I quote, "We need to take the threat very seriously. That means keeping our fiscal powder dry today, so we have the reserves we may need for a coming tariff war." Now, what does she mean by keeping the fiscal powder dry? That's because heading for elections when he's very unpopular. If you look at Justin Trudeau in 2015, his approval ratings, he was very popular. His approval ratings were 63%. Now they are down to about 25%. In fact, in June this year, he had gone down to 28%. Now, because inflation has come down a little bit and also interest rates have come down a little bit, maybe there's a little recovery, so it's gone up to 33%. But his main rival, in fact his only rivals, the Conservative Party, are sitting pretty at 45%. That is a very healthy lead in a straight contest. And that's why he's looking down the barrel. That's why he wants to do some of the stuff that we see our politicians doing and for which we raise many questions. For example, giveaways, freebies, reveries. One of the reveries he's thrown at his electorate is that between 14th December and 15th of Feb, they will pay no GST. So any invoices that they raise in this period will have no GST. So this is a big GST break, GST festival. Won't we love it if our government gave us a GST break for 3 months? No GST. Jo marzi khareedna kharido, buy more of this stuff, buy more of the shoes, or sell anything, no GST. So he's announced that GST holiday for 3 months. The second thing, among the many populist things that he's promised, the second thing is that he will send out in June 250 Canadian dollar checks to anybody earning less than 150,000 Canadian dollars last year. Now just think about it. 150,000 Canadian dollars is like 90 lakh rupees, right? That will be a fairly rich person or fairly well-to-do person. That will not be a poor person. even if you apply purchasing power parity. In India, of course, 90 lakhs per year is a very well-to-do person, but even in Canada, so he's spreading this out to such a large percentage of his electorate. Anybody who earned less than 1,50,000 Canadian dollars, that is less than about 90 lakh rupees in this year, in this financial year, will get a check of $250. Now think about it. $250. Canadian dollar is about 57, 58 Indian rupees equivalent or thereabouts, although it's been falling in value compared to the dollar lately. As of now, it's come to about 70 cents to a dollar, and that is something that leader of the opposition, Pierre Poilievre, keeps talking about. See his tweet where he shows this fall in Canadian dollars value. See another tweet from Pierre Poilievre where he says that GDP per capita, although Canada has seen growth, in fact this year also Canada will get about 2% growth, which is very good for an economy as rich as Canada. Growth is there. At the same time, there is something peculiar about Canada, and I will try to explain it for you. He says, Pierre Poilievre says, and see this graphic, he says that the per capita GDP in Canada in third quarter of 2024 is actually lower than it was in second quarter of 2018. That means for an average Canadian, there has been no growth over 6 years. So how do you explain having growth all these years? Of course, 2020 was a year of nearly 5% negative growth, but following that also, there has been growth every year. The following year itself, there was a growth of about 5%, so there was a full recovery. How come still per capita incomes have stayed stationary? Even now, they are the same as they were in second quarter 2018, 6 years ago. That's because Canada's population has risen very steeply, and that is something that we had spoken about in an earlier episode of CTC, that Canada allowed such heavy immigration, such massive immigration, that their population has grown at a very high rate. It's a rate that G7 countries are simply not used to. And what that has done is, that has increased the population base. GDP has grown, but population has grown faster than that. And that's the reason you get this stationary per capita GDP effect over 6 years. And that is really hurting the Canadians. Now, $250 at that value is how much money you can calculate quite easily. It's just about 15,000 rupees. For 15,000 rupees, an Indian voter will not come and vote for you. An Indian voter with a per capita income of $2,800 will not come and vote for you. Why would a Canadian voter with a per capita average income of $57,000 come and vote for you? This looks like a joke. In Canada, $250 Canadian dollars will not even buy a meal for a family of 4 at even a reasonably modest restaurant. So this looks like an act of desperation. These acts of desperation have upped his deficit. So one of the things that triggered Chrystia Freeland was the fact that while she presented this fall update, she has talked in the past about tightening the fisc, about reducing the deficit. She would have had to present this update that says that with all these promises, Canada's deficit will go up from $40 billion to $62 billion. That goes to about 3% of Canada's GDP, whereas the idea was to bring it down to keep interest rates in check and inflation in check, etc., etc. So that's going wrong, and that's the reason she says in her letter that just when we needed more fiscal discipline and we needed to keep, and I'm quoting from her, our fiscal powder dry, we are actually indulging in costly gimmicks. In the wake of Chrystia Freeland's resignation also came the announcement by Housing Minister Sean Fraser that he will not be seeking re-election. He gave family reasons, but once again, Trudeau critics and the opposition have said that's because he sees no chance of winning given the approval ratings that Trudeau's party has right now. And once again, another indication came in a by-election, or what the Canadians call a special election. So in September, there were 2 by-elections or 2 special elections. Those we spoke about in a full episode of Kartak Radhan, of which I will share a link with you. But in a third election now, in the constituency of Cloverdale, there again, Liberal Party, it was a Liberal seat, and they've got wiped out very badly. And how badly, I will tell you. In the previous election, in the same constituency, or riding as they call it in Canada, in 2021, the Liberal Party had won with a voting percentage of 39.2%. See these tweets from polling Canada. Liberals got 39.2% in 2021. Conservative Party of Canada, CPC, got 36.1%. What's happened this time? Look at the dramatic shift this time. Liberals have gone down from 39.2% to 16%. 16%. And conservatives in a liberal seat. And conservatives have gone from 36.1% to 66%. That's an increase of 30 percentage points. When you see those changes where the incumbent is the other guy, when you see such shifts against the incumbent, then you know that what you're looking at is a possible landslide in favor of the Conservative Party. And that's the reason the Conservative leader, Pierre Poilievre, in fact, one of the most entertaining things I find these days and most enjoyable is to watch and listen to the exchanges in Canadian House of Commons, because it's very disciplined. It's almost like a college debate where people applaud at the right time, or a bit like Wimbledon where spectators are so disciplined, and you can see these exchanges between Trudeau and Poilievre are getting sharper and sharper, and Poilievre is pushing, trying to get an early election. Now this Freeland departure is controversial for another reason, because she's the one who was leading the Canadian negotiations with the first Trump administration, 2016 to 2020. That's again when tariffs were an issue. And she was seen to be a very tough negotiator. She was coming out of negotiations and saying, I get my salary paid in Canadian dollars, not US dollars, etc., etc. So the Trump administration saw her as particularly difficult and hostile. And an impression has spread, and scuttlebutt has also gone around in Canadian media and political circles, that among the demands, early demands that Trump made in his meeting with Justin Trudeau at Mar-a-Lago was to remove Chrystia Freeland as his finance minister. And that is also being given a gender spin. So see what Pierre Poilievre has said. The same week as Trudeau was insulting Americans for not electing a woman president, Kamala Harris that is, he was busy throwing his own woman deputy prime minister under the bus to replace her with a man. Now there's a bunch of points that arise from this, and I will take up only two. One, what is the Trump factor? So even before Trump has taken over, effectively his rise has inflicted its first casualty or claimed its first scalp. That is Chrystia Freeland, because he's got the Canadian Deputy Prime Minister to go, and he's made Justin Trudeau, who he doesn't like at all, who he has a particular disdain for, he's made him look small and maybe pushed him closer to a defeat and an early departure. That's one, and I will tell you a little bit more about how Trump's disdain about Trudeau has come out in the past and has come out even now. And second, why is it that Jagmeet Singh is not pulling the plug, which he should? In fact, he made a statement just 2 days back, and you can watch that video, I will give you a link, where he says that Justin Trudeau should now quit, but he still hasn't withdrawn support from him. If he withdrew support, Justin Trudeau is gone now, an election can be held very soon, but he's not doing it. So that is the second point to which I will come. First of all, Trump's contempt for Trudeau, which also becomes contempt for Canada, because that's the way Trump is. Tomorrow he can say something very different, but see what he's saying now. He's trolling Trudeau and he's trolling Canada by calling it a state, the great state of Canada, not the great nation of Canada, and calling Trudeau governor, so governor of the great state of Canada, and suggesting that Canadians should become the 51st state of America. See his statements or tweets or whatever you call them on Truth Social. He talks like that in public. So I will quote a couple of those to you. He says, for example, no one can answer why we subsidize Canada to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars per year. Many Canadians want Canada to become the 51st state. They would save massively on taxes and military protection. I think it's a great idea. 51st state, right? That is straightforward trolling. And then he goes on to say in another one, and I quote, the great state of Canada is stunned as the finance minister resigns or was fired from her position by Governor Justin Trudeau. So you know what he's getting at. Now he's talked about Trudeau very rudely in the past. Once again, those are lines only someone like Donald Trump can use. He, for example, has questioned Justin Trudeau's paternity, right? Suggesting that he wasn't the son of his father, Pierre Trudeau, saying that his mother, Margaret, was a communist. She was very friendly with Fidel Castro. That is a conspiracy theory that goes around on social media all the time, particularly in conservative circles or in hard right-wing circles. But Trump was quite chilled using it himself. So in a podcast with Ed and Ross on YouTube, he said, and I quote, Margaret, that is Justin Trudeau's mother, Margaret was somehow associated with Castro. A lot of people say Justin is his son. Castro had good hair. The father didn't. That is Justin Trudeau's father, Pierre Trudeau, didn't. Justin has good hair and has become a communist just like Castro. I mean, how much nastier can you get? And when you are coming from there, then you can see how that contempt will now play out in the way he structures his policy towards Canada. And if his policy and his statements can help push Trudeau out of power, he'll obviously go along and do that. So that is happening too. Now we come to the question of why Jagmeet Singh is actually calling for Trudeau to resign, but not withdrawing support and pulling down his government. It is widely believed, and I think it's quite a reasonable explanation, that the main reason he doesn't want to do it before Feb 25. That's a very important day. Feb 25, 2025 is the day he completes 6 years as a member of parliament. In the Canadian system, it's after completing 6 years as a member of parliament that you become entitled to pension. And this is a very lucrative pension. I don't know how this is calculated, but in his case, it will be like 2.3 million Canadian dollars. I don't know whether it's calculated on net present value or over time. I don't know the intricacies. I have this detail from the website of a Canadian MP, that is Melissa Landsman, MP from Thornhill, also from Toronto Sun, quoting Melissa Landsman. And she says that NDP refuses to call elections until sellout Jagmeet Singh gets his Canadian dollar 2.3 million pension. And then she says that he should stop putting his gold-plated pension scheme above the voters. And that is something that Pierre Poilievre also keeps repeating. Once again, this is from what he said in House of Commons. First of all, he said this is a disastrous government, etc., that you would expect from the leader of the opposition about the serving prime minister. But then he says that there's only one person in the entire country who can change this, who can pull down this government. And he says everything that Jagmeet Singh says, I agree with, because Jagmeet Singh also says things which are very critical of Justin Trudeau. So he says, I agree with all of that. But he says, in fact, it's a taunt for Jagmeet Singh. Why is Jagmeet Singh making the entire country wait for him to get his pension? He should put the country ahead of his pension. That is the reason I told you he's also being taunted as Pension Singh now. Now, if this logic works, then I think wait till Feb 25 when the pension deal is done, and then you might see the end of this government and an early election. Otherwise, in Canada, formally elections are due only in October.